heartbeat of ancient Rome, the baker's dawn. As the world outside settles into the deep quiet of night, and the last embers of the day fade into memory, we find ourselves at the threshold of a different kind of stillness, a stillness that has echoed through centuries within the ancient, bustling heart of Rome. Here, in this sprawling metropolis of stone and life, time is not measured by the hurried pace of modern existence, by the frantic rush of schedules and deadlines, but by the steady, deliberate rhythm of sustenance and craft. It is a rhythm as old as civilization itself, a fundamental pulse that beats beneath the grand narratives of emperors and legions. In this quiet city, long before the first blush of dawn touches the eastern sky, before the forum awakens with the clamor of commerce and politics, a solitary figure often began their day, a figure whose work was as vital as it was silent. The Roman baker, they were the unsung providers, the diligent hands that transformed simple grain into the very staff of life, loaf by painstaking loaf. In an era before the widespread mechanization of food production, before the printing press, when every book was a singular, handmade treasure, so too was every loaf of bread, a unique, handmade effort. The baker's labor was a profound act of creation and community, a daily miracle of transformation. Each baked loaf was not merely food, it was a link in the chain of daily existence, a quiet testament to skill and necessity, a tangible connection between the earth and the human spirit. Tonight, we will journey into their world, a world of flour dust and warm ovens, of patient hands and rhythmic labor. We will trace the quiet rhythms of their day, from the earliest hours of the Roman morning, when the stars still held sway, to the meticulous dance of flour, water, and fire that brought forth the daily bread. Let the gentle whispers of their ancient craft guide your thoughts as you drift into a peaceful and restorative rest. Allow the subtle sounds of their work, the imagined scents of their bakery, and the steady pace of their lives to lull your mind into a state of profound calm. This is a story of the everyday, of the essential, of the quiet dedication that built an empire, one loaf at a time. Segment 1. The mill's low hum, from grain to dough. The day of a Roman baker often began long before the city stirred, in the deep quiet of the pre-dawn hours, while the grand villas of the wealthy still slumbered, and the narrow, winding streets of Rome lay cloaked in shadow. A different kind of awakening was already underway in the Pistrinum, the Roman bakery. For many commercial bakers in ancient Rome, their work was inextricably linked to the very first fundamental step of bread making, the milling of grain. Unlike later periods, where milling often became a separate, specialized industry, the Roman baker was frequently also the miller, transforming raw grain into the fine flour that was the very foundation of their craft. This integration of roles meant that the baker's day began not with dough, but with the raw, unyielding kernels of wheat or spelt, waiting to be transformed. Imagine yourself now, stepping into the cool, still air of a Roman pistrinum. The entrance, perhaps a simple wooden door, creaks softly as you push it open, revealing an interior cloaked in a perpetual twilight, even as the sun begins its slow ascent outside. The air inside is thick with the pervasive scent of dry grain, a faint dustiness that settles on every surface, and the faint, earthy aroma of ancient stone and seasoned wood. In the dim light, Perhaps from a few strategically placed oil lamps, you might discern the large, imposing shapes of millstones, silent for now, their rough surfaces waiting to be awakened by the day's labor. These were not the grand, roaring watermills of later centuries, or the towering windmills that would dot the medieval landscape, but often simpler, yet equally effective, rotary mills, known as mola asinaria or mola trusatilis. These ingenious devices, typically made of volcanic basalt, were designed for continuous operation, powered by the patient, steady steps of animals, and, in many cases, by the relentless, unceasing efforts of human hands. In some bakeries, particularly those that supplied vast quantities of bread to the hungry populace of Rome, the grinding of grain was a relentless, continuous process, a ceaseless cycle of transformation. Here, in a confined space, often with small, high windows that offered no view of the outside world, only a sliver of diffused light, donkeys or mules would walk in slow, unending circles, harnessed to the heavy upper millstones. Their rhythmic, unceasing movement would turn the conical upper stone against the stationary lower, slowly, steadily, crushing the hard kernels of wheat or spelt into flour. The sound would be a low, persistent rumble, a deep, comforting hum that permeated the very fabric of the building. Alongside these patient animals, enslaved workers, their movements coordinated with the animals by indentations worn into the basalt floor, would guide the process. They would add grain to the hopper, urge the animals on with soft murmurs, and meticulously collect the accumulating flour, sweeping it into wooden bins. It was a world of ceaseless, demanding toil, a stark reminder of the unseen labor that underpinned daily life in the ancient world, a quiet, arduous foundation upon which the Roman loaf was built. The very design of these spaces, as revealed by archaeological discoveries in places like Pompeii, speaks to a deliberate restriction of movement, a confinement that underscores the brutal realities of ancient slavery. The high, barred windows, the lack of direct exits to the street, all point to a system designed to exploit and control, a sobering counterpoint to the comforting aroma of fresh bread. As the flour, fine and pale, or perhaps coarser and more rustic, began to accumulate in large wooden bins, the baker would turn to the heart of their craft, the sourdough starter. This living, breathing mixture was, in many ways, the soul of Roman bread, a testament to patience, natural fermentation, and a deep understanding of the subtle forces of nature. Unlike modern breads often leavened with commercially produced yeast, Roman sourdough was a wild creation, born from the simple yet profound combination of flour and water left exposed to the open air. This allowed the myriad of airborne yeasts and bacteria, invisible to the naked eye but ever present, to colonize the mixture and begin their slow, transformative work. A successful starter was a precious commodity, a legacy passed down through generations of bakers, carefully nurtured and reused indefinitely. Its quality was as vital to the final loaf as the flour itself, imparting unique flavors and textures that commercial yeast simply could not replicate. Imagine the baker, with hands dusted lightly with flour, approaching a ceramic bowl where the starter had been resting. You might observe its surface, perhaps a delicate film, broken by tiny, gentle bubbles, evidence of the quiet, unseen life within. A subtle, yeasty aroma, faintly sour yet deeply comforting, would begin to permeate the air, a promise of the transformation to come. This starter, often a portion saved from the previous day's dough before salt was added, was the continuous thread connecting one day's baking to the next, a living link in the chain of sustenance. With the flour now ready, its texture varying from the coarse, hearty grains for common bread to the finer, whiter flour reserved for more esteemed loaves, and the starter gently bubbling with life, the baker would begin the mixing. Imagine the large, sturdy kneading trough, perhaps made of dark, aged wood, waiting to receive its ingredients. The baker would measure out the flour, often spelt, or a type of whole wheat, into the trough. The measuring was likely done by eye or with simple volumetric scoops, relying on years of experience and an intuitive feel for the right proportions. Then, water, perhaps drawn from a nearby well or collected from a cistern, would be slowly added, along with a pinch of salt, carefully crushed between the fingers, and perhaps a splash of golden olive oil for a softer crumb and a richer flavor. The water, cool and clear, would gradually begin to bind the dry flour, transforming it from a powdery substance into a cohesive mass. The hands of the baker would then begin their rhythmic dance, slowly bringing the disparate elements together. It was a low hydration dough, meaning it contained less water relative to the flour, making it firm and resilient, requiring sustained effort to bring it to a smooth, cohesive ball. The kneading was a physical, repetitive act, a pushing and folding, a turning and pressing that developed the gluten within the dough, giving it structure and elasticity. The sound would be a soft, rhythmic thud against the wooden trough, a comforting, steady beat. This was not a hurried process. Each movement was considered, each fold deliberate, ensuring the dough retained its airy structure while developing its strength and a smooth, taut skin. The hands would cup the dough, gently rotating it, applying just the right amount of pressure to create a seamless bottom, a perfect sphere ready for its distinctive markings. The baker's muscles would ache, but the satisfaction of the transformation, the feel of the dough slowly becoming smooth and alive beneath their hands, was its own reward. This initial mixing and kneading was often followed by a period of rest, a crucial pause in the process, typically a day or two. During this time, the dough, covered in an airtight container, perhaps a large earthenware pot or a wooden barrel, would be left on the counter, not in the cool of a cellar, but at ambient room temperature. This allowed the wild yeasts within the sourdough starter to continue their slow, quiet work of fermentation, breaking down the complex carbohydrates in the flour and producing the subtle flavors and gases that would give the bread its characteristic texture and aroma. Twice a day, with a quiet dedication, the baker would return to the dough, kneading it for a few minutes, a gentle, repetitive action that further developed its structure and allowed the wild yeasts to continue their slow, quiet work. This patient waiting, this deliberate slowness, was an integral part of the ancient baking process, a rhythm that mirrored the unhurried pace of life itself. The subtle, yeasty aroma, now more pronounced, would begin to fill the air, a comforting promise of the transformation to come, a silent testament to the power of time and natural processes. This deep dive into the initial stages of Roman bread making reveals a world of patient labor, elemental ingredients, and a profound connection to the natural world, all unfolding with a quiet, deliberate rhythm designed to soothe and calm. Segment 2. Shaping the loaf. Art and precision. With the dough now rested, having undergone its patient, slow fermentation, and the wild yeasts within it slowly working their quiet magic, the baker moved to the next crucial stage, shaping the loaves. This was where the raw, unformed mass, once a simple mixture of flour and water, began to take on its final, familiar form, a process requiring both skill and a gentle, intuitive touch. The dough, having been kneaded and rested, would now possess a new character. It would be more pliable, more elastic, and subtly fragrant with the promise of baked bread. Its surface, perhaps, would show a delicate sheen, a subtle tautness that spoke of its readiness. Imagine the baker's hands, dusted lightly with flour, reaching into the large kneading trough. The dough, cool and smooth to the touch, would yield slightly as it was lifted, its surface perhaps showing a few small, gentle bubbles, evidence of the quiet, unseen life within. The baker would take a portion of this risen dough, a generous amount, perhaps weighing it by hand, relying on years of experience to judge the correct size for a standard loaf, and place it onto a floured wooden counter. This counter, worn smooth by countless hours of work, its surface perhaps slightly uneven from generations of use, would be the stage for the next act of transformation. Simple tools lay nearby, a wooden bench scraper, useful for dividing dough or cleaning the work surface, perhaps a small bowl of water for moistening hands to prevent sticking, and a generous dusting of flour, ready to prevent the dough from adhering to the wood. The movements of the baker were rhythmic and deliberate, a practiced dance that had been honed over years, perhaps generations, passed down from master to apprentice, or from parent to child. They would begin by gently folding the edges of the dough towards the center, creating tension on the surface, slowly coaxing the mass into a round boule, a spherical shape that would become the foundation of the Roman loaf. This was not a hurried process. Each movement was considered, each fold precise, ensuring the dough retained its airy structure while developing its strength and a smooth, taut skin. The hands would cup the dough, gently rotating it, applying just the right amount of pressure to create a seamless bottom, a perfect sphere, ready for its distinctive markings. The sound would be a soft, almost imperceptible sigh as the dough yielded, a quiet testament to the baker's control and understanding of their medium. The flour dust would rise in faint, ephemeral clouds with each movement, settling softly back onto the surface, a visual echo of the quiet work. One of the most iconic forms of Roman bread, and indeed, one of the most frequently depicted in archaeological findings, particularly in the friezes of the tomb of Eurysaces, was the panis quadratus, or square bread, though its shape was, paradoxically, round. This distinctive loaf was characterized by its deep indentations, which divided it into 8 wedges, and a central hole, often made by pressing a finger or thumb into the dough. These divisions were not merely decorative flourishes, though they certainly added to the loaf's visual appeal. They served a profoundly practical purpose. In a world without pre-sliced bread, these pre-formed wedges made it remarkably easier to break off individual portions for consumption, a simple yet ingenious convenience that facilitated sharing and portion control in a bustling Roman household or at a busy market stall. The very design of the panis quadratus speaks to the Roman appreciation for order, practicality, and a certain elegant simplicity, even in something as fundamental as a loaf of bread. To achieve this characteristic shape, the baker would employ simple yet remarkably effective tools and techniques. After forming the round boule, a piece of kitchen twine or string, perhaps made of hemp or linen, would be carefully tied around the circumference of the loaf. This created a subtle waist, a gentle constriction that would remain on through the baking process, helping to define the loaf's final form. The twine was tied with just enough tension to create the indentation without cutting too deeply into the delicate dough, ensuring it would not tear the surface during the final rise. Then, just prior to baking, the top of the loaf would be dusted with a light, even coating of flour, a final touch that would give the crust a rustic, appealing finish. Using another strand of twine, or perhaps a simple wooden tool with a blunt edge, the baker would make 4 deep indentations across the top of the loaf. These lines would intersect at the center, where the central hole had been formed, effectively dividing the loaf into its familiar 8 sections. This meticulous attention to detail, this precise, repetitive action, even in something as seemingly simple as a loaf of bread, speaks volumes about the Roman appreciation for order and form, a quiet artistry applied to the most basic of necessities. The process was a quiet meditation, each knot and indentation a deliberate act of creation. While the panis quadratus was undoubtedly the most common and recognizable form of Roman bread, the baker's repertoire was not limited to this single shape. Depending on the grain used, the intended consumer, and the occasion, other forms existed. There were simpler, unleavened flatbreads, perhaps cooked directly on hot stones or in shallow pans, offering a quicker, more rustic option for those in a hurry or with simpler tastes. For the elite, or for special occasions, the baker might produce fancier, whiter breads, made from more finely milled flour, sometimes enriched with ingredients like cheese, honey, or even poppy seeds. These variations in bread type subtly reflected the social distinctions of Roman society. White, leavened bread was generally preferred and associated with higher social standing, a mark of refinement and wealth. Its lighter texture and paler color were seen as superior, a symbol of leisure and access to more refined ingredients. In contrast, coarser, brown breads, made from whole grains or less refined flour, were often given to sub-elite guests or consumed by the lower classes, a reflection of their more humble circumstances. To know the color of one's bread was, in essence, to know one's place in Roman society, a quiet, unspoken language conveyed through the daily loaf. The baker, therefore, was not just a craftsman, but also an unwitting participant in the social stratification of their world, their hands shaping not just dough, but also, in a small way, the very fabric of Roman life. The subtle aroma of different breads, the visual distinction between a pale, airy loaf and a dense, dark one, would have been immediately recognizable to any Roman citizen, a constant, gentle reminder of their societal position. Once shaped, the loaves were not immediately placed into the intense heat of the oven. They were allowed another crucial period of rest, typically an hour or two, during which they would undergo a final, gentle rise. This crucial proofing stage was a time of quiet anticipation, a period where the dough, now fully formed, would relax and expand further, preparing itself for the dramatic transformation that awaited it in the oven. The baker would carefully arrange the shaped loaves on wooden peels, long-handled shovels used for transferring bread into and out of the hot ovens. These peels, smooth and worn from countless uses, their surfaces perhaps lightly floured, would cradle the delicate loaves, ready for their journey into the heat. The loaves might be covered with a light cloth to prevent their surfaces from drying out, allowing the final rise to proceed undisturbed in a warm, draft-free part of the bakery. The air in the bakery, already subtly perfumed with the yeasty, earthy scent of rising dough, would now be filled with a deeper, more complex aroma, a comforting fragrance that promised warmth, sustenance, and the satisfying crunch of a freshly baked crust. This patient waiting, this final quiet expansion, was essential for achieving the desired texture and volume in the finished bread. The baker, having completed the active work of shaping, would now observe, allowing nature and time to complete their part of the process. The subtle expansion of each loaf, the slow, almost imperceptible swelling, was a testament to the living forces at play within the dough. A final breath before the fire, this segment, with its focus on the tactile process of shaping, the quiet artistry of the baker's hands, and the gentle anticipation of the final rise, invites the listener to appreciate the patient craftsmanship involved in transforming simple ingredients into a staple of ancient life. The repetitive motions of shaping, the meticulous attention to detail, and the gradual transformation of the dough are inherently calming, drawing the mind into the quiet rhythm of the baker's hands, a rhythm that has echoed through millennia, connecting us to the fundamental acts of human creation and sustenance. Segment 3. The Oven's Embrace. Fire and Transformation. With the shaped loaves now gently proofed, their surfaces smooth and subtly expanded, their internal life quietly bubbling, the baker turned their attention to the heart of the bakery, the oven. This was the crucible of transformation, the place where the raw, living dough would undergo its final, most dramatic metamorphosis, emerging as the golden, fragrant staff of life. These were not the precise, temperature-controlled ovens of today, with their digital readouts and automated settings, but robust, elemental structures, typically constructed from rubble and tiles, designed to retain immense, radiating heat. They stood as imposing, beehive-shaped mounds within the bakery, often domed, encased in thick brick structures that served to insulate the intense heat within, a silent, powerful presence that dominated the space. The oven's mouth, a simple archway, would glow with a deep, inviting warmth. The process of heating the oven was a ritual in itself, a patient dance with fire, a testament to the baker's deep understanding of their craft and the raw power of the elements. Wood, carefully selected for its burning qualities, perhaps olive wood, known for its slow, steady burn, or oak, for its intense heat, or perhaps charcoal, would be meticulously placed inside the oven's chamber and set alight. The baker would tend this fire with a quiet and dedication, allowing it to burn steadily, slowly, until the oven's interior reached a scorching temperature. The visual cue for this readiness was often the color of the bricks themselves, transitioning from their natural hue to a pale, almost white-hot glow, radiating an intense, dry heat that could be felt even from a distance. This initial heating could take a considerable amount of time, often several hours, a period of quiet waiting and observation, where the baker's experience and intuition were their most vital tools. They would know by the subtle shift in the air's warmth, by the way the heat shimmered from the oven's mouth, by the way a handful of flour tossed inside would instantly char when the moment was right. This patient preparation was as crucial as any other step, ensuring the oven was a perfectly calibrated environment for the delicate transformation to come. Once the oven was sufficiently heated, its interior a silent, glowing cavern of warmth. The baker would meticulously rake out the ashes. This was a crucial step, ensuring a clean, hot surface for the bread to bake upon, free from any lingering embers that might scorch the delicate crust or impart an undesirable flavor. Long-handled rakes and shovels, made of wood and metal, would be used for this task, their movements rhythmic and precise, sweeping the fine, gray ash from the oven floor. The sound would be the soft, rhythmic scraping of the rake, the subtle rustle of ashes, a quiet prelude to the main event. Sometimes, to ensure a consistent temperature throughout the baking process, a few carefully selected hot coals would be placed back into the oven, nestled against the walls or in specific depressions, providing a steady, gentle heat source that would sustain the baking without direct flame. This careful management of heat was a skill passed down through generations, a silent knowledge held in the baker's hands. Now came the moment of truth, the culmination of hours of patient preparation, with practiced movements, honed by countless repetitions. The baker would gently slide the proofed loaves, one by one from the wooden peels, onto the hot oven floor. The peels, long-handled shovels, made of smooth, light wood, were extensions of the baker's arms, allowing them to reach deep into the oven's fiery embrace without exposing themselves to the intense heat. Each loaf, carefully placed, would meet the scorching surface with a soft, almost imperceptible hiss, a quiet exhalation of steam. The sudden burst of intense heat would cause the dough to undergo its final, dramatic expansion, a phenomenon known as oven spring. This rapid swelling, a testament to the gases trapped within the dough, would create a light, airy crumb within a crisp, resilient crust. The enclosed space of the oven was crucial for this initial phase. It allowed the bread to cook in its own steam for the first few minutes, preventing an instant, hard crust from forming and ensuring the loaf could swell out properly, achieving its full, satisfying volume. Once all the loaves were carefully positioned, the opening of the oven, often a simple archway, would then be covered with a large, flat stone or a sturdy wooden door, effectively sealing the heat and steam within, allowing the quiet magic of baking to unfold. For the next 45 to 60 minutes, or even longer for particularly large or dense loaves, the bread would bake, slowly transforming in the intense, dry heat. Inside the oven, a complex alchemy was taking place. The heat would penetrate the dough, causing the starches to gelatinize and the proteins to coagulate, setting the structure of the loaf. The crust would begin to brown, slowly at first, then deepening to a rich, golden hue, developing its characteristic crispness and flavor. The baker, ever vigilant, would monitor the process, perhaps occasionally peeking into the oven through a small crack or by briefly lifting the cover, relying on experience and intuition to judge when the bread was perfectly done. There was no timer, no precise thermometer, only the subtle cues of sight and smell, a deep, intuitive understanding of the baking process. The aroma of baking bread, warm and comforting, would gradually fill the entire bakery, a scent that spoke of sustenance, of home, and of the fundamental goodness of simple ingredients transformed by fire. This fragrance, initially subtle, would deepen and intensify, eventually spilling out into the Roman street, a silent invitation to passers-by. It was a scent that evoked warmth, security, and the promise of a satisfying meal, a universal language of comfort. As the baking progressed, the subtle crackling of the crust, the quiet hiss of escaping steam, would be the only sounds, a gentle symphony of transformation. When ready, a tap on the bottom of the loaf would reveal a hollow sound, a clear, resonant thud, indicating a perfectly cooked interior, a sign that the moisture had evaporated and the crumb was fully set. Finally, the moment arrived for the loaves to emerge from their fiery embrace. With the same practice movements, the baker would use the wooden peel to carefully retrieve the hot, fragrant loaves one by one. They would emerge, golden brown and perfectly formed, their distinctive 8-wedge shape now permanently set, their crusts crisp and inviting. A faint wisp of steam might still rise from their surfaces, carrying the intoxicating aroma of freshly baked bread. The loaves would then be placed on cooling racks, perhaps simple wooden grids, allowing the air to circulate around them, preventing the bottoms from becoming soggy and allowing the internal structure to firm up completely. This final stage, the cooling, was as important as any other, allowing the flavors to fully develop and the texture to achieve its perfect balance. This segment, with its focus on the elemental forces of fire and the quiet, transformative process of baking, offers a deeply calming experience. The steady crackle of the fire, the rhythmic movements of the baker, and the gradual emergence of the finished loaf all contribute to a sense of profound satisfaction and peace, a timeless narrative of creation. Segment 4. The Baker's Lot. Status and Sustenance. With the day's baking complete, the Roman baker's work transitioned from the intense heat of creation to the quiet, satisfying task of distribution and, ultimately, consumption. The warm, fragrant loaves, now cooled to a perfect temperature, would be carefully stacked on wooden shelves or loaded onto carts, ready to be sold in the bustling Roman markets or delivered directly to households. Bread was not merely a component of the ancient Mediterranean diet. It was the absolute staple, fundamental food that unified society, present in the elaborate meals of emperors and on the humble tables of the poorest households alike. In many instances, a single, substantial loaf of bread probably constituted an entire meal, providing the necessary calories and sustenance for a day of labor or leisure. It was the very foundation of daily life, a constant, comforting presence, a silent, essential partner in every Roman's day. The ubiquity of bread meant that its presence permeated every aspect of Roman society, from the grandest banquets, where delicate, finely milled white loaves might accompany rich dishes, to the simplest family meals, where a rustic, hearty brown bread would be torn and shared. Bread was the central element. This universal presence, however, did not mean uniformity. The type of bread produced and consumed often reflected social status, a subtle yet clear indicator of one's place in the intricate Roman hierarchy. White, leavened bread, made from the finest, most laboriously milled flour, was generally preferred and associated with higher social standing, a mark of refinement and wealth. Its lighter texture and paler color were seen as superior, a symbol of leisure and access to more refined ingredients. In contrast, coarser, brown breads made from whole grains or less refined flour were often given to sub-elite guests or consumed by the lower classes, a reflection of their more humble circumstances. The phrase, "to know the color of one's bread," was a common idiom meaning to know one's place in Roman society, a quiet, unspoken language conveyed through the daily loaf. The baker, therefore, was not just a craftsman. They were an unwitting participant in this social stratification, their hands shaping not just dough, but also, in a small yet significant way, the very fabric of Roman life, the subtle aroma of different breads, the visual distinction between a pale, airy loaf and a dense, dark one would have been immediately recognizable to any Roman citizen, a constant, gentle reminder of their societal position. The social standing of bakers in ancient Rome was, like the bread they produced, nuanced and varied, evolving significantly over centuries. In the earliest days of Rome, for perhaps 600 years after the city's founding, bread was primarily a domestic product. Women, as Pliny the Elder tells us, were often the primary bakers within their own households, preparing bread for their families, an observation he based on comparisons with contemporary non-Roman peoples. This was a private, intimate act of sustenance, deeply embedded in the rhythm of home life. However, by the end of the Roman Republic, a profound shift occurred. The increasing population of Rome, coupled with the demands of a growing urban center, led to the commercialization of baking. Private bakers, known as pistores, emerged, establishing dedicated bakeries with mills to mass-produce bread for public consumption. This commercialization led to a greater need for professional bakers, and the profession became increasingly popular, allowing skilled pistores to make significant money, accumulating wealth, and even achieving a degree of prominence within their communities. Indeed, the essential nature of their work was recognized at the highest levels of Roman governance. The Emperor Trajan, for instance, is said to have established a collegium pistorum, a guild of bakers, specifically to help ensure the continuous and reliable supply of bread to the vast city, a testament to their vital role in maintaining social order and public welfare. This guild provided a framework for organization, regulation, and perhaps even a sense of collective identity and pride for its members, a quiet recognition of their indispensable contribution. However, despite their essential role and the potential for wealth, the profession of a baker could also carry a complex, sometimes negative, reputation. Some Roman writers, like the esteemed orator Cicero, considered baking a lowly occupation, and bakers were sometimes associated with servility. This perception was often tied to the widespread use of enslaved labor in bakeries, particularly in larger commercial operations that prioritized efficiency and mass production over individual craftsmanship. Archaeological findings provide a stark and sobering glimpse into this darker side of ancient baking. The discovery of a prison bakery in Pompeii, for instance, reveals cramped, dark rooms with small windows set high in the wall, often with iron bars, offering no view of the outside world. The only exit from these production areas often led directly into the main house. Not even the stable had direct access to the street, suggesting that permission was required to leave. This was, in essence, a space designed to restrict the freedom of movement for those of servile status, a chilling testament to the brutal realities of ancient slavery. Within these confined spaces, enslaved workers were forced to toil alongside donkeys, their movements coordinated by semicircular indentations worn into the volcanic basalt paving slabs around the millstones. These tracks, incredibly durable, were likely deliberate carvings made to prevent the blindfolded draft animals from slipping, simultaneously tracing a path that synchronized their relentless movement with the human laborers. The 2nd century AD writer Apuleius, in his Metamorphoses, paints a disconcerting picture of these conditions, describing the backbreaking labor to which men, women, and animals were subjected in ancient mills and bakeries. It was a system devoid of trusting relationships or promises of manumission, where individuals were reduced to brute force, their lives a ceaseless cycle of grinding and kneading. The discovery of 3 victims in one of the rooms of this Pompeian bakery further confirms that, despite ongoing renovations at the time of the eruption, the complex was far from uninhabited, bearing silent witness to the harshness of their daily existence. This aspect of the baker's lot, while grim, is a crucial part of understanding the full tapestry of Roman life, a quiet acknowledgement of the unseen suffering that often underpinned the daily comforts of the ancient world. Yet, it is important to remember that not all bakeries operated under such harsh conditions. Many smaller bakeries likely fostered a sense of intimacy and closeness, often run by family members, perhaps assisted by a few enslaved or hired helpers. In these establishments, customers were almost surely familiar faces, creating a more personal connection to the daily bread supply, a quiet, communal exchange that transcended mere commerce. The baker in such a setting might have been a respected figure in their neighborhood, a reliable source of daily sustenance, and a familiar presence. Their work a quiet cornerstone of community life, perhaps the most enduring and powerful symbol of the Roman baker's significance, and indeed of the pride some took in their profession, is the extraordinary Tomb of Eurysaces. This monumental tomb, located near the Porta Maggiore in Rome, was built by a wealthy baker named Marcus Virgilius Eurysaces for himself and his wife. What makes this structure so remarkable is its unique design. It is shaped like a giant bread oven, and its friezes are adorned with vivid depictions of the entire bread-making process, from the grinding of grain to the kneading of dough and the firing of the ovens. This extraordinary monument, a quiet yet grand declaration, stands as a powerful testament to one man's immense pride in his profession and his remarkable success within it. It is a public, enduring statement of the vital role bakers played in feeding an empire, a silent, architectural hymn to the daily loaf. The tomb of Eurysaces, with its meticulous detail and its bold celebration of a seemingly humble craft, offers a comforting reflection on the enduring legacy of those who provided daily sustenance, a quiet dignity that transcends the centuries. This segment, by exploring the complex social tapestry surrounding the Roman baker, offers a gentle reflection on the diverse experiences within a single profession. It acknowledges the harsh realities of ancient labor, while also celebrating the enduring legacy of those who provided daily sustenance, allowing the listener to ponder the quiet dignity and profound impact of their work, a quiet echo through time, drifting into history's embrace. As the echoes of the Roman pistrinum fade into the quiet of this moment, we leave the diligent baker to their well-earned rest. We have journeyed through their day, a cycle as old as civilization itself, tracing the quiet rhythms of their ancient craft. We began in the deep quiet of the pre-dawn hours, when the rhythmic hum of the millstones began their slow, unceasing work, transforming raw grain into the fine, essential flour. We then witnessed the patient hands shaping the dough, coaxing it into its distinctive forms, a quiet artistry performed with simple tools and profound skill, each movement a testament to precision and dedication. We felt the radiating warmth of the beehive oven, a crucible of transformation, where fire and time worked their ancient magic, turning simple ingredients into the golden, fragrant loaves that sustained an empire. And finally, we reflected on the baker's complex place within Roman society, a role both essential and nuanced, marked by dedication, ingenuity, and sometimes the unseen toil of others. Their life, a tapestry woven from the threads of routine, devotion, and meticulous craftsmanship, reminds us of the quiet power of focused effort. It speaks to the enduring legacy of sustenance, a fundamental human need that has shaped civilizations and connected generations across the vast expanse of time. The Roman baker, in their quiet corner of the ancient world, was a vital link in the chain of daily life, their work a constant, comforting presence that underpinned the grand narratives of history. Their legacy, etched in stone and preserved in the very idea of bread, continues to resonate, a testament to the profound impact of everyday labor, a quiet echo through the centuries that still nourishes us today. Allow the gentle rhythms of their ancient world, the low, comforting hum of the mill, the soft thud of kneading dough, the steady, warm crackle of the oven's fire, and the pervasive, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread to continue to soothe your mind. Let the quiet dedication of these unsung figures, their patient hands, and unwavering purpose guide you now into a state of profound peace and restorative sleep. May your dreams be filled with the timeless calm of history, carefully preserved, one quiet loaf at a time. Good night.